Hey guys, it's wonderful to see all of those smiling faces of yours. Today we're going to be making a drawing that is kind of like a still life or an observational drawing. We're just, like the video I made recently where I looked at this bowl of fruit and drew this bowl of fruit. And so it's going to be kind of like that, except we're going to kind of, at the end of that video, I talked a little bit about how your job as an artist is not always to draw what you see, but sometimes it's to make the viewer see something. So we're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to use this same picture. Link is down in the description if you want to download and print or just look at this picture. It's a free picture from Pixabay, and there's a link down in the description. Anyway, I'm going to use this same picture again. But instead of trying to draw what those fruits actually look like, I'm going to do what's called abstraction. Now, here are some examples of abstractions. And if you look at these paintings, you can easily see what each of these actually is supposed to be, but they don't look like what they actually are. They don't look like real life. Their shapes are simplified, their textures are emphasized or de-emphasized in different ways, colors might be changed. So as I redraw this picture, I want to make some alterations. I want to not try to make it look like a real bowl of fruit necessarily. I want to think about what kinds of things I can emphasize or underemphasize, what details can be left out, or what things need to be made more prevalent. So I'm going to jump right into that here on a nice fresh sheet of paper. And for starters, let's take a look at this bowl. I could and did in that other video try to, measure out how wide is that bowl, how tall is that bowl. Let's make this bowl look exactly like the one in the picture. But as an artist, sometimes my job is to try to figure out what is it about this bowl that really gives it its bowliness. What's important about this bowl? If I completely leave the bowl out, right, it's just a pile of fruit. Maybe it's not a pile. Maybe the fact that it's in a bowl tells us that it's on a table. Tells us that it's collected all in one place and on purpose, and more accessible and reachable. Whereas if we just have a pile of fruit without the bowl, then it kind of maybe makes it look more like supermarket-y, where it's just a bunch of fruit and you're not really sure, well, is this on a table where I can go grab some, or is this more like a display of some kind? So maybe that's the importance of the bowl. That's the reason the bowl is important. So does that mean that I need to draw this exact bowl exactly like this? No. I could just figure out what is it that gives it its bowliness. And so I'm going to kind of simplify that, and I'm going to keep the round bottom of the bowl, because I think that helps to make it bowly. But instead of making this, nice curve, trying to get that exactly looking right, I'm just going to do like a half circle, a semicircle for my bowl here. So I'm going to make a nice long straight line, straight across, and then a curve, maybe a little bit flattened on the bottom. There's a bowl, okay? If I want it to look more like this bowl, see how this bowl has these stripes along it? I could add stripes along this. That's my decision here as an artist to say, if I do a bunch of stripes along this bowl, then it might distract away from that line. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, it depends. How important is that line? How important is the table to this picture? Well, again, going back to the idea that this is a bowl on a table does have a huge impact on this, because in our minds as we look at it, that tells us that the fruit is more accessible. It's not just a pile at a grocery store. So I think keeping the table is kind of important. Maybe leaving the bowl empty and not adding any texture to it, those horizontal stripy lines, maybe leaving that detail out is actually going to draw our attention more to the bowl. We'll make that decision later. For now, I need to figure out how I want to include these fruits and even which ones of these fruits I want to include. And this could be a simple decision based on, well, what's the point of the picture? Right? I keep going back to the idea that this is a bowl of fruit on a table, accessible, where you can eat it, but who's going to pick up a lemon and put it in their mouth? Okay, well, Mr. New would, I would, but most people, most sane people aren't going to do that. So I just won't put the lemon in this picture. Same thing with an avocado. Like, nobody's going to walk up and just grab an avocado and eat it. I mean, first of all, the skin is gnarly. You'd have to cut it open. And, I mean, some people, I guess, just dig it out with a spoon and eat it. But usually you turn it into guacamole or you slice it and put it on sandwiches or something. But you don't just eat it by itself. So I'm going to think, which ones of these fruits do you eat by themselves? Peaches, oranges, bananas. Oh, well, there's a fruit that's not even in this bowl, apples. Maybe I could put an apple here instead of this avocado or instead of this lemon. So I can change some things. Also, I don't necessarily have to draw them exactly these shapes. Like this really wonky, weird peach here that's like squished and stuff, I could just leave that one out. I don't have to try to draw that shape. So what I'm going to do in this picture is gain inspiration from this, but make abstractions. Okay, and again, I'm trying to simplify things. So this peach, I can simply draw as just a round shape. Just a round shape. Did I measure it to make sure it gets put in the right place? No, that's not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about here is getting the idea. Now, there's going to be several of these, and they're going to overlap. Like they're all piled up in there, right? I'm going to leave some space on one side because I think, when I put these bananas in, I kind of want them to be a little bit more visible. Here, they're kind of hiding behind everything. I'm actually going to put the bananas on the other side. This is another abstraction choice. I'm not drawing exactly what I see. I'm making changes to what I see. So I'm going to draw in these bananas on the other side, and I'm going to make them more visible by not having as much fruit in front of them here. So I'm fine with piling up more fruit over here on this side, but on this side, I'm just going to let those bananas shine. And now I think it's time to kind of take some inspiration from this avocado, which has a stem kind of thing poking up from it. So I'm going to make an apple with a stem kind of thing poking up from it. Maybe there's a leaf on that stem. Now there's not even an apple in this picture. I'm just kind of making that part up as I go. And maybe a big old cantaloupe or melon of some kind in the background behind a bunch of things. Maybe even behind this the bananas here. So a nice big curve across. And there, now that is a fairly good start at making an abstracted bowl of fruit. I'm going to sort of go in and add shadows on everything because I want it to have kind of a three-dimensional feel. Notice if you look at the original picture here, there's some dark, deep patches in between shapes. This one looks like they had like a bunch of studio lighting shining from all different directions, so it's really brightly lit. But imagine if the light was all shining in from one direction, the shadows would all be on one side. So I'm going to kind of do that, and then I'm going to go in and break up these shapes a little bit. So for starters, I'm going to make along the left side of this bowl a deep, dark shadow. On the left side of this orange or peach or whatever it is, a deep, dark black shadow. Along the left side of this apple, a deep, dark black shadow. Along the left side of this one and this one and this one, a deep, dark black shadow. And so by doing that, I'm creating a little bit of three-dimensionality to this. Let's see, along this melon, this giant melon, it's kind of, I don't like the way that shape ended up turning out. So I'm actually going to kind of like, give it a little bit more volume on this side because it was a little too flat. Anyway, and then I'm just going to kind of use that to my advantage to make a deep, dark black shadow. Oh yeah, my bananas, they need shadows too. Each banana is going to have a shadow on the left side. And then we are ready to do some final abstractions. Now, what I personally like to do, and you can follow along with this idea, or you can go your own completely different direction with it. It's totally up to you. But what I really like to do when I put an abstracting touch on something that's more realistically drawn like this is I like to just draw some lines that kind of go over everything. And then when I add color, I'll make those colors in a way that, where they don't go over the lines. That'll make sense here in just a minute. So what I'm going to do is kind of pick, sort of lines that I want the eyes to move in, directions where I want the eyes to move in, right? We've already got these lines from the bananas that move our eyes this way. We've also got the line from the stem of the apple, which moves our eyes this way. We've also got this sort of row of fruit that moves our eyes that way, and this lower row of fruit. So we've got a lot of diagonal movement going that way. So maybe I'll counter it with some diagonal movement going the other way. So maybe I will start with just boom, just make a solid line all the way across, and then boom, make a solid line all the way across, and then boom, and then maybe boom. So I've got here a bunch of lines that just kind of cut everything apart. Maybe I want a little more than that. Maybe I want some shapes. Just throw some shapes in. Maybe I want to throw in some like triangles. So something like that. There's a big old triangle right on top of my picture. Maybe I want a square, right? Because I've got a lot of round shapes, right? The fruits and the bowl are all very round shapes. Maybe I want some shapes that have some straighter, harder edges. So maybe I'll do a square, or a rectangle. Let's make it a rectangle, kind of over in this area. Boom. Just drawing right on top of everything. Maybe I'll do sort of, I don't know, a trapezoid. So I could do something like this. Trapezoid. There we go. Okay. So I've just drawn some lines on top of everything, and I've drawn some shapes on top of everything. Now I'm looking less at the fruit and more at just overall which way lines are pointing us. And one thing that I'm clearly noticing is that the shadows, because of the way I have the light shining in this way and the shadows all on the left side of everything, that means that this bowl has this dark shadow on the left, and that's not balanced over here. Now the shadows on these fruits do kind of get balanced by the shadows on the bananas on the right side, but the bowl has this big, bright, it feels too light over here. So maybe in this area somewhere, I need to add some darker patches. So I'm going to just, make some shapes and then darken some areas in. So I'm going to darken in parts of this circle. I just made a circle here. I'm just darkening part of it in, not because it's a shadow, but just because I want to balance the darkness on this side. And why not? I'll go ahead and darken in that tiny little gap there too. And then, is there anywhere else where I think that needs to be balanced? Maybe, maybe something in this side. Maybe I'll do another triangle and darken in that right there. Yeah, okay, that's good for now. Maybe I'll have to come back and do some more balancing later, but for now, that feels pretty balanced. Now it's time to add color, and when I use color, there's a couple of ways I could think about it. I could think, well, what color is a banana? It's yellow. What color is an apple? It's red. What color are oranges? They're orange. Or I could think, what are some colors that would not be normal, but would still give us the feel that it's bananas, apples, and oranges, right? So, like, in other words, if I made the bananas orange instead of yellow, would they still feel like bananas? If I made the apple, I was about to say green, but you actually can get green apples. So let's think of a different color. If I made the apple purple, would it still be apple-y? Another way to think about it could be, well, how do I feel today? If I feel blue, if I feel sad, down in the dumps, then I could just make everything with different blues. Or maybe I feel really joyful and energetic. I could make everything out of oranges and yellows. Or maybe I am feeling a little sick. Or maybe these fruits make me feel sick. Maybe I don't like fruits, so I'm just going to do a lot of greens and browns and make it look almost poisonous. So in other words, there's lots of different ways to think about color, but every time I put a color in, I'm not going to go over a line. I'm just going to use these basic old watercolors for this. You could use markers, crayons, colored pencils, pastels, really whatever. But here's the idea. I'm going to go with the thought that, bananas are yellow, but I don't necessarily want to use just yellow. So I'm going to start by painting in some yellow, just some regular old plain yellow, into one of my banana shapes. But notice how I'm not going over the line, right? That point of a triangle goes into my banana, and then this triangle covers over part of my banana, and I am not going to paint over those lines, okay? So I'm going to jump over that part and paint this next section, but then I'm going to come across another line. I'm going to have to stop again, okay? Well, that's most of a banana. I might just leave those sections white. Maybe it's like there's black and white coming into the colored world. That could be an interesting way to look at this. Okay, well, so far, I am loving the way that this is looking, where it's like these triangles are turning everything black and white, is what it looks like. And then there's this path here that I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with yet. But I think what I'm definitely going to do is make sure that these shapes, these triangles, rectangles, circles, and trapezoids, are sort of just turning everything black and white. And then where these other big long lines are that jump across the whole page, I might decide that maybe I want to do something interesting with color shifting as it goes over those lines. We'll see. Not quite sure yet. Oranges are orange, so I'm going to paint this orange. Again, when I reach up to that line, I'm going to stop and go around it. And the apple should be red, but only the part of the apple that is outside of this giant triangle, right? This big triangle is going to just, everything in there is going to be black and white. All right? But that leaves a tiny little piece of the apple up there that I haven't painted, and a tiny little triangle down here that did get painted, although it shouldn't have because it was over the line. And that leaves these sections of the banana that are over a line, but not inside of this rectangle or inside of this triangle. So I think what I'm going to do in those areas is choose the other color of that same fruit, right? So bananas are sometimes yellow, but they're also sometimes green. So here, I'm going to paint the rest of these bananas down on this part green, like green bananas. And the apple, right? Sometimes apples are also green, so I'm going to use green for that little piece of the apple as well. And the big old melon, let's see, melons are usually sort of a peachy, beige-ish kind of a color. I'm going to come in here with a little bit of brown and then see if I can mix some orange into that brown to make it look more peachy colored. We'll see how that works when it's dry. Right now it's wet, so it's kind of hard to see. We'll see how that turns out when it's dry. And the bowl. I think what I'm going to do with the bowl is make it blue and purple, or maybe light blue and dark blue would work. I really want it to contrast against all of the bright fruit colors. So I think what I'm going to do is light blue and dark blue. So here I have a really deep indigo. It's like a dark blue violet. And I want to use that color here. Then skip this section is going to be a lighter blue. And then this section is going to be my dark blue. Again, I'm not painting inside this trapezoid or the rectangle or the circle or the triangle. I'm just switching colors as I go over my big long lines. And I just came back and realized that this part of the melon, between the banana and the orange, this little shape here is part of the melon, but it's not inside of the triangle, so that needs to be the same brownish orange as this. And it's time to start thinking about the table and the wall behind. If I'm going with the thought that these shapes are the black and white that is like, you know, taking over the color world, then I really want to make sure that the wall and the table are both colored. But I don't want them to be the same color, and I want them to be colors that will, A, contrast against what's in those areas, and B, contrast against each other. So up here, these fruits are almost all warm colors. We got yellow, orange, and red. So a cool color up here would be best, maybe purple or something like that. And then down here for the table, this is all cool colors, so some kind of warm color down here would be best, maybe yellow or orange. Like that. And now, I need to go back and decide, are there any other bits and pieces and little doodads in here that I need to darken up black with my Sharpie, right? Because if we look at this circle here, right, we've got this black part of it, and then some white sections, right? If we look at this triangle up here, we've got this black section and then some white sections. If we look at this big triangle, it's pretty much all white, except for where I had some shadows of my fruits. Same thing with this big, trapezoid down here. And then this rectangle has everything white. So I need to decide, this is where I go back and do some more balancing thoughts, and I try to decide what else needs to be darkened in black. And I think part of the answer on this triangle needs to be this little chunk of it down here. I think that just feels like it's screaming out to me to say, darken me in, fill me with black, make me the shadow section of this triangle. And now that I've done that, I'm looking at the rest of this triangle, and I feel like it needs something else darkened in up here, and I'm trying to decide between the point at the end, or this little area, or maybe these areas. I think these two areas behind this banana. Yeah, I kind of like that. Alright, I think that's good for this big triangle. I think this little triangle, just that point, needs to be, yeah, like that. I think the circle is probably good the way it is. I think the rectangle is definitely going to need some blackening in, and I think this is definitely going to need some blackening in. So let's go ahead and on this trapezoid, I'm going to do this big section down here. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then definitely this little chunk up here, as well as maybe one more piece. Let's take a look back. I'm going to step back and look at this and see, do I need this chunk to also be darkened in? Or do I want the big chunk to be darkened in? Or do I want to do something really strange, like take this line here and carry it on, and then darken in some more sections down here? Like, I can just add more lines wherever I want, right? This is abstract. In fact, I feel like this corner of the triangle needs to be dark, but I don't want the whole thing to be dark, so I'm going to make another line in there and darken up some stuff. Darken up some stuff. And I feel like this trapezoid needs, this big empty white space kind of broken up a little bit. So we'll curve a line up, do something kind of like that. Darken this area in right here. Figure it out. Just make it up. Have some fun with it. Now, I am absolutely loving the way this is turning out, except my paints were not completely dry, so as I've been laying my hand on this to darken things in, I've been getting some paint on the side of my hand, and then I see little smudges, like here there's some red and orange inside of my blue. There's not a whole lot of a way to fix that. I think this piece I can kind of scrape off, but there's still smudges. What I can do is just wait for it all to dry and then try to go back and paint over that. It might cover it a little bit, but it's watercolor, so it's going to be transparent, so you're going to see that forever. I could use that to my advantage and just kind of splotch some paints all over the place, but I think for the sake of this picture, I'm going to leave it as is. There is one more thing I think that is bothering me a little bit, and that is the bottom of this apple where it's kind of behind everything. There's also going to be shadowy area in here. So I'm going to kind of try to make a sort of the bottom of an apple shape. Darken in that whole gap. And then also just do some more of these extra little lines to break things up. I think I'll just go something like that. Just because it just feels like it's too big of a white space. And there, I think I'm going to call that done, leave it as is, and say that right there is finished. Maybe I should darken in this. I could probably go back in and nitpick details again and figure out that there's more that needs doing. But I want to just go back and reiterate something about abstract art. A lot of times in my classroom, I have students that will just scribble something and then say, "It's abstract art, Mr. New." No, it's not. A lot of people think that abstract art doesn't have to follow any rules. And that's not true. We kind of made this up as we went along, yes, but I was following some very specific rules as I made this. Number one, I was at least loosely starting with an idea that came from something I've seen before, something that's recognizable. Whether I stayed there or not, in the end, no, I didn't. But I at least started with an idea that represented something realistic or something I'd seen before. Second, when I was placing out these lines and shapes on top of my art, I was clearly thinking about directions of movement and lines for how your eyes are going to move around the picture. Third, when I was choosing colors, I was making decisions about realistic colors versus not realistic colors. I was making choices about contrasting colors, warm colors versus cool colors, all sorts of things like that. So what I'm doing here is I'm using all of the elements of art, line, shape, color, texture, those things. I'm using those to make decisions about how I put all these together. And I'm also using the principles of design like balance, unity, contrast, variety, those kinds of things to help me kind of figure out how do I want all of these things to be placed and colored and shaped in such a way that is interesting and pleasing to the eye, instead of just scribbling all over a page and saying, "Hey, Mr. New, do you like my scribbly abstract art?" Now, there is one more question, though. Do you have to make your abstract art the way that I made my abstract art? Absolutely not. You saw I showed some other pictures earlier of abstract art that was clearly nothing at all like this, but each of those artists also used the elements and principles of art to help make their decisions with their art. You can either try to copy this style or one of those other styles, or make it up as you go, but think about the elements of art and the principles of design and how you're putting everything together to make something that's actually interesting to look at.